for some people, love is an emotion, right? It goes up and down, and it's like I'm in love today, I'm not in love, la la la, and it's not a very stable thing. For me, there's a stability to love that isn't like emotions, because emotions, they move, they change with the weather. They come on strong or soft or do all sorts of things like that, and they recede once their work is done. But for me, love doesn't do any of these things. It doesn't recede, it doesn't change with the weather. Basically, for me, it's like a dedication to the soul of whatever I love, to whether it's a person or a thing or an idea. It's a complete dedication to it. And it's different, very different from emotions.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dreamcatcher podcast, a place where your dreams can find a voice. I'm your host, Celine Chenoy. Thank you to all of you who return every week to tune in to become a better version of yourself. Make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't already, and rate our show if you enjoyed this episode. We've been told that emotions are mostly problems, but nothing could be further from the truth. Emotions do not create problems, they contain the exact genius you need to solve those problems. My guest, Karla McLaren, believes that when we access the brilliant wisdom in our emotions, we can create a deeply meaningful, healing, and awakened life. Karla McLaren is an award-winning author, social science researcher, and empathy innovator. She is CEO of Emotional Dynamic Incorporated, developer of Dynamic Emotional Integration, and creator of Empathy Academy. Karla is the author of several books, including Embracing Anxiety and The Art of Empathy. In this interview, Karla will take us much deeper than naming or managing our feelings. She'll teach us how to honor them, reflect on their questions, and incorporate their wisdom into our lives. Hey, Karla, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you taking the time to be here to share your immense knowledge on all things emotions. And we're just excited about what you have to share with all of us.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to share things about emotions anyway. I love emotions.
Yes, it's definitely apparent from your books and all the work that you do. So, yeah, and I read your book, Language of Emotions, and it was an eye opener. I learned a lot of new things, some of which really surprised me. For instance, I always thought that love was an emotion, but you say it's not.
Yeah. I think for some people, love is an emotion, right? It goes up and down, and it's like I'm in love today, I'm not in love, la la la, and it's not a very stable thing. For me, there's a stability to love that isn't like emotions, because emotions, they move, they change with the weather. They come on strong or soft or do all sorts of things like that, and they recede once their work is done. But for me, love doesn't do any of these things. It doesn't recede, it doesn't change with the weather. Basically, for me, it's like a dedication to the soul of whatever I love, to whether it's a person or a thing or an idea. It's a complete dedication to it. And it's different, very different from emotions.
Right. Yeah, that's a good explanation. Yeah, that makes sense now. So, Karla, your curiosity about emotions started in your early years. You say that you became aware of emotions and that they were healing vital forces. And you also developed hyper empathetic skills, as you describe them.
Yeah.
And you did that because you needed it to cope with a difficult early childhood. So, how did you learn to tap into these skills and make them a strength despite all the challenges that you faced?
Yeah. turning up my empathy and my emotional awareness was a survival skill. It's so that I could, this was a repeated, ongoing situation. So I had to develop, I guess, sort of investigative skills in how humans behave so that I could be as safe as I possibly could. But because I didn't know how I turned them on, I didn't know how to turn them off. So in situations where I wasn't in danger, I still had that level of emotional empathic awareness of what was going on. And it was pretty overwhelming. It was intense. And I also dealt with a lot of rage when I was little. And I was very fortunate that my family allowed me to have it, because most little girls are talked out of their rage. So for me, emotions were very intense. They were very kind of overwhelming. And so as I began to understand I'm never going to be able to get away from these things, so what are they for? Why are they here? What's going on? And that was the first sort of, impetus to get me to study emotions, is that they would not shut up in my own life. And I knew they must mean something, or something was going on here. Yeah.
Okay. When did you start questioning your feelings and getting curious about what they're all about?
Probably when I was about 4. I
Wow.
began, yeah, I began sort of studying emotions, because humans confuse me so much and emotions confuse me so much that I started looking at, for instance, okay, category anger. When people are angry, what has happened and what are they doing? When my cat is angry, what has happened and what is he doing? And so I began to sort of look at it almost sociologically, like, when this category anger comes up, what is happening? And so I eventually did that with all of the emotions. With anger, it's always about a boundary. There's been a boundary crossed, and then the anger comes up, and then the boundary is addressed in some way. For many people, it's addressed very clumsily. For other people, it's addressed very badly. For other people, it's addressed in a violent way, but it's always about a boundary.
Interesting. Interesting. And do people experience emotions differently, like at various intensities? Like you said, you felt them very deeply. Like you seem
Yeah.
like you were very passionate. So, do people have different temperaments?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And people experience emotions very differently, and they react to them very differently. So we can't say, okay, that's anger. I can understand there's a boundary that's been crossed, but then what the person learns to do or knows how to do with anger is very individual. And where they feel it, how they feel it, it's extremely individual as well.
Yeah, because I've noticed that some people are able to really conceal how they feel. Like they seem really stoic, like
Yeah.
but you really don't know what's going on deep down inside. You know, it could be like a storm going on inside. So I think
Yeah.
the way we feel emotions and the way we express them, it's just, I think it varies tremendously.
Yeah. It's very, there's a thing going around, I guess, Facebook, where it's a picture of human bodies in silhouette, and it shows all kinds of different colors, and like, this is anger and this is sadness. I mean, that is just nonsense. It's complete nonsense. I don't even know where it came from, because, in your own family, you can see that one person does anger this way and one person does anger that way, and one person's not very aware of anger and the other one is super aware. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you can't say this is what anger looks like. Yeah.
And I can see that being a problem in relationships. Like, you know, if two
Yes.
partners express
Yes.
anger differently, they
Yeah,
could,
especially cross culturally,
yes, yeah.
where, yeah, that's sometimes it's very hard to read people who come from places that you don't have any experience with.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. And you're right that emotions have been repressed, downplayed,
Mhm.
distrusted,
Mhm.
overglorified, and even despised for centuries.
Mhm.
So, Carla, why has it been so difficult for us to really understand our feelings and see the value in them?
I think two things. One is that we're chased away from emotions, like, oh, don't cry, don't cry. or don't talk back to me, young man, that we're chased away from them. So we end up with very few emotional skills. So when an emotion comes up, we generally behave in an unfocused way. So people can very easily get the information that emotions are trouble, right? We're told that they're not welcome, and then we don't develop skills. So whenever an emotion's there, we kind of look like fools, right? We're just so this sort of distrust of emotions, there's a lot of data, right? There's a lot of social data that tells us, yeah, emotions are no good. They're not good.
Yeah.
The other thing, which is a kind of a deeper underlying thread that I'm seeing, is that we understand emotions now as the generator of consciousness. They underlie all of our thoughts, all of our behaviors, all of our actions. Emotions underlie how we vote. They underlie how we respond to political leaders. They underlie how we choose our mates, right? So emotions are incredibly powerful underlayment of human nature. And what I'm seeing is that if we don't give people the awareness of their own emotions and the skills they need, they're very easy to manipulate. So when people say we're not going to have emotions or we're not going to have this emotion, I always look for the social control, and it's always there. So it's, there's two pieces to it.
Yeah.
If you can control a person's emotions, you can control the person. And
Right. And that's
yeah,
why a lot of I'm reading a lot of books, and a lot of people I don't know, like for instance Stoic scientists, a lot of them say that you should be careful of emotions are
yeah,
to be you should be careful of them basically,
yeah.
and that you should not trust them, and you should rely on logic more. So you don't agree with
But they're
that?
not wrong.
They're
They're
not
not
wrong.
wrong. We've all seen people with their emotions
Yeah.
behave like absolute monsters, right?
Yes. Yes, I mean, you
That
could even kill someone when you're in the fits of rage, and I mean that's of course
yeah,
an extreme case, but
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so they're not wrong, but they are blaming the wrong thing. Uh, the emotions are just what they are. It's people's skills with emotions that they're looking at and
right.
not seeing. They're not able to, like, I'm like, use your logic, pal. Separate the emotion from the person's skill with the emotion, right? Because if you see someone who's skilled with emotion, you're gonna you may not even identify it as an emotion. So with anger, if I set a boundary and I know what I'm doing, I don't need to hurt anybody or myself. I just set a boundary. And that's anger. And a lot of people wouldn't even know it was anger. They would have no idea that anger just happened in the room because all they see is people going, why do you know what I mean? Um, yeah. So I think, and the funny thing is that logic is built on emotion.
Oh,
And
really?
you wouldn't,
Okay.
right? The thing is, like, there's logic and emotion, and logic is way up here in the stratosphere of greatness, and emotion is down here in the garbage. But logic is predicated on emotion. Ha ha.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why you clear that up in your book. You say emotions do not create problems; they contain the genius you need to solve them.
Yes.
And so you're saying sometimes it's better to have some distance from your feelings and rely more on your analytical side, right?
Well, I think one of the things that we look at is uh, the different levels of emotions. So there's soft or medium or intense. Each one has a purpose, right? When someone steps over a boundary and is very insistent about it, then I'm going to need more anger, right? So it's going to be okay there if I have more anger. I still need skills with it. And I can say, hey, I said no 3 times. Now, what the heck's going on here? Because this is what I said, right? That's more anger. But it's not so much analytical skills that I need as emotional skills, to understand the emotion, to know how to work with it, to know what its purpose is, and then to help it achieve its purpose. And then the emotion will step back. It won't ever go away because it's a part of our basic cognitive function. But yeah, I think there's, when people say, let's get analytical, what they mean is let's pretend that we're not being emotional right now. And I thought,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, how about if we don't pretend? How about if we deal with the emotion as it is and
Yeah.
figure out what it's trying to do? Yeah.
Yeah. So what you're saying is don't ignore it, don't repress it, bring it up
Yeah.
and process it, see what's going
Yeah. Know
on.
what it's doing, know why it came forward. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you actually created a model for us to be able to, you know, do that, to go through that process. And you call it the 4 keys to emotional genius.
Yeah.
Could you please give us an overview of these 4 keys?
These are the four, when I first introduced them, I called them the 4 problems that get in the way of emotional awareness.
Okay.
But we turned them into the 4 keys, like we flipped the script. And the first one is that there are no negative emotions and there are no positive emotions. And this is sort of the key, because if we're taught to see emotions as negative and positive, we immediately become less emotionally functional, because the negative emotions category is huge. I look at a model of 17 emotions and 14 of them are negative, or they would be called negative. The entire fear family, the entire anger family, the entire sadness family. There's only 3 that are called positive, and that's happiness, contentment, and joy. But these emotions have very specific purposes, just like anger does, just like any of the other emotions do. And they cannot possibly help us run our life, because we're only using like 17% of the emotions, if we believe that. But when an emotion is negative, what people tend to want to do is not have it, which means they don't develop any skills with it. And if it's positive, they want to have it all the time, which is an abuse of those emotions that we've identified as positive. So just taking that idea out, there's no negative or positive emotions, you become more emotionally intelligent, like immediately. So that's what we
Right.
want.
But like, Carla, in the moment, if it really feels painful, like something,
Yeah.
if you feel triggered and it comes from a really deep wound from your past, in that
Yeah.
moment, it can feel like you just don't want to deal with it because the
Yeah.
pain can be so
Definitely.
acute, especially if it's, a trauma victim.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so yeah, in that case, how can one remain cognizant of the fact that no, this is not a negative emotion. I need to stick with it and see
Yeah.
what's going on.
Yeah, I think understanding, each of us has our own kind of emotional landscape, and understanding what our emotions are saying. So, for instance, if we have a flashback, or if something brings us back to a time in our lives when we were powerless or being injured, there's a purpose to that, which is the psyche as a whole needs to revisit those points at which we were overwhelmed,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can develop skills in the future and reclaim the resilience that we need, knowing that that's true, that we were overwhelmed, we were injured, there was inequality, there was injustice. And I think a lot of people have been taught that resilience is being up tempo and happy, happy crappy. but but what it is for me is an understanding of the reality of evil in the world, and then my decisions about who I will become in the face of it. And if I don't look at my emotions, if I don't listen to the panic or the rage or the anxiety that come up, I'm missing a huge opportunity for growth, for evolution, and for a kind of making sacred what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's missing in a lot of current trauma healing modalities today is they just want to get rid of those emotions. And the emotions are what come to heal the problem. So in a lot of ways, we're being, again, moved away from emotions for a reason that I don't know how to say this. We're being made shallow.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah. And do you
made
think it's
shallow.
because we're living in an age of social media and, we want quick fixes and things like that? Do you
Yeah,
think that might be impacting us?
I think you're right. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of you need to feel better.
Yeah.
You need to feel happy. You need to feel up tempo.
Yeah.
And so that positive and negative overlay on the emotions is very much a part of that social control. Because one of the things about the negative emotions is they all request change, and the positive emotions are okay with how everything is. Right? That's what the positive emotions do. They're like, this is nice.
Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's really appropriate. But there are a lot of things, especially as we're looking around ourselves at the political state of the world.
Yeah.
There's a lot of not okay right now.
Right.
And
Right.
it's really interesting that there's so much of psychology and the healing that's like wanting us to just be okay.
Yeah. Positive
What's
psychology,
going on?
right? Yeah.
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 It's not okay,
It's not
y'all.
okay.
It's
Yeah.
not okay.
Yeah. I mean, I first learned about the value of pain from I don't know if you know the Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron.
Mhm.
She speaks a lot about the value of pain and just sitting with it and really allowing yourself to be immersed in it and
Yes.
befriending it, and so that you can actually understand what's happening and how that is the key to healing and really getting a deeper
Yeah.
sense of who you are and your journey.
Yeah, because the pain is so instructive. It's my pain. It's a pain that I'm feeling. It has meaning to me. Or, the intrusive thoughts. Those are important. They're saying something, and sometimes they're saying it in a way that's very confusing. So I need to sit with it for a while. It's like, what is that? Um, we're sort of mysteries wrapped up in enigmas, and sometimes emotions and thoughts and pains are the only ways that we can speak to ourselves.
True.
Second, is to understand that emotions arise at different levels of activation, right? So most people think of anger and they think of rage, and there's so many gradations of anger. And this is really important. For instance, with anger or anxiety or panic, if your organism somehow learned to do anger at 11 and anxiety out of 10 and anxiety at 15 and panic at 9,000, part of your work is to understand panic at 10, at 1, and then to try to work with it before it needs to get to this massive flowering of that emotional expression. So understanding emotions at different levels of activity can really help you learn how to work with them more effectively. For instance, a lot of people would say, I'm never angry, but they get to this place and they boil over because they didn't even realize that when I was peeved or irritated or, I was a little bit sarcastic, I was dealing with anger then. They don't see it when it's lighter than that. The third is that it's normal for emotions to work in pairs and groups and clusters because they're aspects of intelligence. The more, the merrier. But if you don't have skills with them and you don't know what they're doing, it may feel like you're being attacked. Right? You're like, I was just walking along the street and then these 5 emotions came and they attacked me. But at this point, I'm like, bring it, emotions. I want more emotions. Where's my panic? Where's my depression? Let's go. That it's normal for them to work together.
Can you give an example of when that can happen?
I was thinking of the pandemic, and I don't know how it is in Dubai, but we're having another COVID surge here. And so we didn't stop masking. We haven't had COVID yet I have a 4-person pod and we've never had it. So we've maintained our awareness. And what I noticed in the pandemic is I needed 3 emotions that most people avoid, which is fear, anxiety, and panic. to be available to me at all times. And for a lot of people, those three emotions, which needed to be present, were overwhelming. And they were like, I don't need to wear a mask. This is all just ridiculous. We're being lied to by the government, right? They went a different direction. And fear is the emotion that helps you remain very intuitive and aware of the present moment. Anxiety is the emotion that helps you look toward the future and prepare yourself. And panic is the emotion that saves your life when your life is literally in danger. All three emotions were necessary throughout the pandemic. And because my pod has practices for these emotions and knows how to identify them and work with them together, we were fine. We didn't go into, QAnon, right? We didn't go into making up stories about anything. We just stayed stable and maintained our awareness. So when we would go out to the supermarket, we'd have our fear working in the present moment, making sure that we had enough space around ourselves. We had anxiety. It had prepared us to go to the market. We had our mask. We knew what we were doing, right? And we had panic, which was always there saying, this is COVID's deadly. People are dying. So keep your wits about you, right? And so working with those three emotions was easy for us.
Yeah, great example. Yeah.
And then the fourth is learn how to channel emotions. And I don't mean like channeling dead people. It's channeling things along the path that they meant to take. So with anger, for instance, the channeling would be to set a boundary, because that's what anger is doing. With fear, it would be to maintain an intuitive, instinctual sense of my surroundings. With anxiety, it would be preparing for the future. With panic, it would be making sure, am I safe? Am I in literal danger of losing my life? And so with those emotions, I'm knowing what the emotions do. I'm doing the actions that would support the intelligence in that emotion. And that way my emotions and I are friends. And when they show up, I can say, hey, what do you need? Let me see what I can do for you.
But how do we gain the knowledge on how to process these emotions? Because we don't learn this in school, and not all of us have caretakers or parents who were conscious enough to teach us about how to manage our emotions. So what do we do? Like, how do we know whether what we're doing is right?
You can get my book.
Yeah. I mean, I think the chances are people listening to this are pretty self-aware already, the kind of people who tune into this kind of podcast. But, if they want to help their friends or their family or their kids, what would you suggest? Besides your book?
Well, one of the best things is there's been a lot of research recently about an emotional vocabulary. And they're finding that developing a stronger emotional vocabulary, which would mean that anger is also sarcasm and peevishness and this, and then it moves up, right? To have a strong emotional vocabulary gives you emotion regulation skills all by itself.
Yeah, because if you can name it, you can understand it. Yeah.
You can know what's happening. This is especially important for anxiety and panic, because many people who are feeling those emotions go to the emergency room thinking they're having a heart attack, right?
Yes.
So that, it's like that level of not knowing what emotions are, that people can't even identify a physical versus emotional response to something. So I have a free emotional vocabulary list on my site, and it's something that is really helpful just to be able to look at it and say, how am I feeling? And finding the word, you're like, that's what I am.
Yeah.
I'm dejected. I'm dejected. And you can walk around the house. Look at me in my dejection. But just saying it seems to settle the whole organism. So now your body knows, oh, I'm not hungry, right? I'm not being chased by lions. I am dejected, right?
Yeah. So having the right word, So having the
right words, it's huge. And they're also finding that what's called a granular emotional vocabulary, which is you you get to the grains of the emotions and not just rage.
Yeah.
It's all the different colors, is having heart and brain protective effects. And I would say it's maybe because you're not flying all over the place wondering what's happening to you, that you're more able to settle into the reality of what you're feeling.
And is it true that there are some languages that have a richer vocabulary when it comes to feelings and
Yes.
emotions? Yeah, because I know there's one.
And a horror one.
Yeah. Like for instance,
Yeah.
Greeks, they have like 7 different words for love. Or
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think that's why language is so important. I think there was some research on the Russian language speakers who have many names for blue,
yeah.
whereas in English you might have light blue, dark blue.
Right.
And shown a spectrum of blue, the Russian speakers could see more blue, right? Where people would be like, well, it's kind of a dark, 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 dark black. Whereas the Russian speakers had, this is this blue, this is this blue, this is this blue. So having language means you can see more colors of blue, and having language means you can feel more, much larger range of emotion.
Yeah. I know there's a German word for the feeling that you get when you take delight in someone's misfortune. I
love it.
I cannot pronounce it for the life of me. But you know what I'm talking about, right?
Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude, exactly.
Yeah, it's like savage glee at the misfortune of another. What a beautiful emotion.
I know. And we know we've all felt that at some point. Come on, just admit it, everyone.
Thank you, Germans. Thank you, Germans. For creating that word.
Okay, Karla, one more thing I want to touch on is another model that you introduce in the book. It's called the 4-element or the quaternity model. And I personally really like this one because it has like mythological and poetic origins. And plus, they do use the 4 elements in astrology, and I have a pretty good knowledge of astrology, so I could understand it instantly. But how does knowing these 4 elements help us with, gaining insight into our feelings and, just understanding them better?
I brought in the elemental model because I noticed, like you were talking about the Stoics saying we want to get away from emotion and be in logic. And that's what we've heard from a lot of places. I grew up in the American New Age spirituality. Everybody has their own New Age. This was like Northern California American New Age spirituality.
The 70s? Is it the 70s?
Yep.
Okay.
70s and 80s. There we go.
Yep.
You got it.
Yeah. Yep.
And so for us, it was, we were spirits, and that was the truth of us. And our bodies were kind of a thing that we visited while we were incarnating, right? Emotions in particular took quite a hit in our belief system because they were kind of connected to the body, right? So the spirit was what you wanted to be, the intellect, whatever, the body, the emotions, no, right? So I went from that world into the skeptical world, which is the Stoic world. And they were very intellect over all. Intellect, there is no spirit. Intellect is everything. Emotions are trash, right? So there's a lot of ways where the emotions are trash. And the elements are, spirit is fire, intellect is air, emotions are water, the body and the physical world is earth, right? I noticed that in many of these systems, the emotions got kicked out of the window and like, get out. And I saw that in each of them, the imbalance was so extreme. In the New Age world, because emotions are disallowed, you've never seen so many emotionally disrupted people. It is so bad. And in the skeptical, atheist, thinky world, same thing.
Yeah.
The same problems, they'd explain it differently, right? So, and then understanding emotions as the water, nothing can live without water. The reason life exists on this planet is water. we are mostly water. And so if we turn away from the water element, which is emotions, we're turning away from what makes us alive. Yeah.
Right. And I love how you say that sometimes we need to, knowing these elements, by knowing that we can find like coping mechanisms that are specific to whatever we're feeling. If you're feeling sad, maybe we need more fire, maybe we need more water. And you give like several techniques and several activities that we can partake in for each element.
Yeah.
And I found that particularly helpful. Yeah, I mean that's honestly my favorite part of the book.
Yeah, we just did in our licensing program, everybody's doing their final projects, and someone just did an elemental balance, and we were filling out the elemental balance worksheet. And it was really interesting to see, oh my goodness, I am mostly air right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I am mostly in my intellect right now and what's going on with my body. And then you can balance it out.
Yeah.
And
that actually happens to me a lot. I tend to be in my mind too much, and I realize, and I get overwhelmed. And now I realize all I need to do is like just get outside and go for a walk, because that's earth, right? So that's an example of how you can balance yourself using the elements.
Yeah, and very simply too.
Yeah, it's that simple.
Because these are all we can access all of these things, but sometimes we just get really one-sided.
Yeah. Definitely. This was it's a paradigm shift, really. So great. So Karla, it's been great talking to you. I think that the work you're doing is really important, considering the rise in mental health challenges that we're facing in our society, and people really need to have more knowledge and tools to regulate their interior world. And books like yours is really going to help with that.
Thank you.
All right. So I just want to let everyone know, whoever's listening, if you're interested in knowing more about Karla's work, and if you want to purchase her book, The Language of Emotions, it is available in any bookstore, or you can visit her website, karlamclaren.com. The link will be in the description.